It is so wonderful to be with all of you. Oh, God. Thank you so much for coming. Some of you have driven a long way to get here, and I appreciate it. Please serve Ken, the beer is out there. Teresa, wine. Please keep serving yourself wine and beer, and go out and get the beer's going to stay out there. We'll bring some wine in here. But anyway, please keep serving yourself, because we're going to do a little talk story. I've got some stories to share. But anyway, thank you all for being here. This is a group of very special people, very dear and near to Ed and me. Some of you are friends and colleagues that go way back. Someone asked me, how long have you known some of these people? I said, well, that person right there since 1969.
But that person there is old as dirt.
It started out as we were going to have Ed's engineering firm was called Edge, and we started out just having an Edge gathering. It was going to be in North Carolina, and Susan and the family had just been here. And when I didn't think they would, all want to come back from Hawaii. But Susan said, Mom, we want to be here. And so we changed the venue from North Carolina to here. Well, we're having it right here. And I thought, I can't have a gathering to celebrate Ed without having my neighbors and special friends. So this is a combination of friends, family, and colleagues. I'm going to talk about the colleagues first. Ed was so proud of all of you who worked with him. And most of you, maybe all of you, maybe all, left after Edge was sold to a public company, left the company and went out and formed your own companies, which have been hugely successful. I mean, every one of you. Those who didn't rose to the tops in other engineering firms. Ed used to tell me, he said, the key to a successful business is hiring people that are smarter than you. I told that to Barry Thacker one time, and Barry replied, there was no one smarter than Ed. That may not have been true, but Barry, I love you for saying it. But anyway, he was immensely proud of all of you. And then when we moved to West Haven, and Ed got sick, as most of you know, Ed was treated at Duke Medical Center. So we would get on a plane and fly to Duke, spend the night in a hotel, have doctor's appointments all the next day, and then fly back to Nashville, to Franklin that night. When we came back after every trip, there was dinner in our refrigerator. Not just a casserole, but a 3-course meal. And 2 of the ladies that are helping tonight were responsible, and I think one has already had to leave. So many of my friends here brought us food. No, thank you, thank you. And Ed was thrilled. I would tell him who was cooking that night, and Ed always looked forward to that. And we could not have made it that last year without my neighbors. Ed lost his strength and mobility in the end, and there were times where I had to call a neighbor to help me. And I called John Palmer one night and got him out of bed, but he came. He was there in 3 minutes and helped. So could not have made it without friends and neighbors that last week. And there's one person here that I'm still depending on, and that's Gina Jones. Wouldn't have made it through all of the probate and financials and all the advice, and she does something for us every day. Thank you, Gina. Couldn't have done it without you. Well, there are many stories that I could tell. There were so many sweet, sweet times and memories that we had that last year. But I want to share a couple. The last couple of weeks that Ed was with us, he developed encephalitis on the brain. There was a lot of pressure, and that was when he was losing his mobility. And we met with a neurosurgeon, and a neurosurgeon at Vanderbilt wanted to try a shunt to relieve some pressure on his brain. So we scheduled the surgery, and the day before the surgery, he was getting so weak. And Susan and Jamie and I decided it's going to be too hard to get him up at 5 o'clock in the morning and get him to Vanderbilt. So we were going to call the ambulance and have him taken to the hospital and be ready for that surgery the next morning. So that's what we did. We called, Jamie called 911. The fire department was there in 5 minutes or less. Not even. So the EMTs came in with their bags, and they were checking. They came in the front door. They were checking Ed's vital signs, and the ambulance came in the back with the gurney. And I told Riley, I said, Riley, don't let Emma out of your sight. Keep her. This is our black lab. Keep her out of the way. And so Riley was doing a really good job of that until they rolled Ed out the back door and up into the ambulance. When Ed's feet disappeared into that ambulance, Emma darted for that ambulance and jumped up on the steps. She was going to be in there with Ed if they hadn't closed that door. So anyway, Susan and I got in my car. Susan was driving. I was in the passenger seat. And, we were sitting there, and tears were flowing down our cheeks. And I looked through the windshield, and there was this tiny little dragonfly, the most exquisite blue I have ever seen. I've never seen a dragonfly like that before. It was almost like it wasn't of this world. In our darkest hour, we're never alone. God is always with us, and sometimes God sends a messenger. And I looked at that dragonfly, and I looked in its little eyes, and I thought, you were sent to us. And something told me that it was going to be okay. It was like, we've got this. It's going to be okay. Not that Ed was going to come out of the hospital cured, but somebody was going to be taking care of him other than the doctors and us. So anyway, we followed the ambulance to the hospital. Vanderbilt neurosurgeons are fabulous. Dr. Thompson, and I can't remember the resident's name. I've got it written down. I wrote down all of his doctors. The resident neurosurgeon met me on the sidewalk to explain to me what was going to happen. Have you ever had a neurosurgeon meet you on the sidewalk to explain what was going to happen? Well, he did, and had the best doctors at Vanderbilt. They tried a temporary shunt at first to see if it would work to relieve some pressure on the brain. And if that worked, they were going to do a more extensive internal shunt. And they didn't want Ed to go into a coma or to go to sleep very long. So they were waking him up every 2 hours and asking him questions like, what's your name? What day is it? Well, I didn't know what day it was. And they kept asking him, who's the president? And one time he opened his eyes real big and looked up and he said, Donald J. Trump. The external shunt was not helping much. And Ed had a motto, and many of you wore these bracelets. Yeah. And it says, don't let up. And Ed didn't let up until he decided he wasn't going to do that last surgery. And he told the doctor, he said, I want to go home. The neurosurgeon, told us that was a good choice. And he told Susan and me, he said, take him home and love him up. And that's what we did for the next 6 days. When I got home with Ed that afternoon, Jamie, Susan, and the boys had his hospital bed set up. I'm so glad for West Haven. We've got a big old bedroom, and when we moved in, I thought, gosh, this is so big. Well, I'm glad it worked out great because we had a hospital bed in there, and they had decorated it with family pictures and flowers and memorabilia. And every night, Garrett, we all gathered around his bed. We pulled up easy chairs around his bed, and Garrett played and sang, and he was hardly alone in that room. Sometimes Riley would go in and sit in the chair and just read. And Riley, Granddaddy may have had his eyes shut, but he knew you were there. And he loved you for coming in and sitting beside him. You were so good to him. Everybody was. So Garrett played music every night except the last night, and I think Garrett was just, he was just finished. And so Susan was sitting on his bed, and she was sitting at the head of the bed, I was sitting at the foot of the bed, and she said, well, let's just play a little Willie Nelson. So we had a Willie Nelson night. We played Whiskey River, Take My... And, Ed, he almost smiled through it all. So anyway, the next day, Ed was in hospice care. I cannot say enough about hospice care. Those nurses, the hospice nurses could work in any hospital in the country. They do hospice care because that's what they want to do. It's a calling for them. They were fantastic. The last day, the hospice nurse came, and she told us that she had a booklet that would tell end of the stage what might happen in the last weeks, the last days. But she left and she forgot to give it to me. And then 15 minutes later, she came back and had this booklet, and she gave it to me. And I went in and sat at the foot of Ed's bed, and I read the whole thing, and I thought, well, he didn't have to go through that, he didn't, And then I got to the last page, which was a poem. Now I'm going to back up a little bit. Ed and I spent all of June in Montana. And because we spent a whole month there, and because I thought I might get a little bored, I downloaded 5 books on my Kindle and proceeded to leave it in my seat when I deplaned in Idaho Falls. I got there without a book and without a Kindle. Ed's partner in the house in Montana, love that woman. She helped decorate, but she went in Dillon, they were having a library sale. She went to that library sale and bought all their used books and put them. Ed has a lot of bookcases in the Montana house. So when I got to Montana, I perused the books to see, okay, what do I want to read? And I found a book by Henry Van Dyke. And the title of the book was Who Owns the Mountains? So I started reading that book, and I'd savored every page. That book was so much like Ed. In fact, I kept thinking, is Ed a reincarnation of Henry Van Dyke? Except Henry Van Dyke was a Presbyterian minister. Maybe that part not. But and he was a Princeton professor and a lecturer. He lectured all over the world, but mainly he went fly fishing all over the world. And he was a great outdoorsman. He could listen to a bird and tell you, knew every tree, all the foliage. And he wrote about it. He wrote essays about it. And that's what this book was about. I mean, Ed could have written the book. Ed was a great writer, too. But anyway, I carried that book around and read it. It wasn't a big book, but, I was reading on it all month. I think I read maybe one other book, but I just kept that book and kept reading it because it was just, I enjoyed it so much. Anyway, I read my little booklet, and I sat down, and on the very last on the last page, I move it over to an easy chair, and I read this poem. I'm standing up on the seashore. A ship at my side spreads her white sails to the morning breeze and starts for the blue ocean. She is an object of beauty and strength. I stand and watch her until at length she hangs like a speck of white cloud just where the sea and the sky come to mingle together. Then someone at my side says, "There, he is gone." Gone where? Gone from my sight, that is all. He is just as large in mast and hull and spar as he was when he left my side, and he is just as able to bear the load of living freight to his destined port. His diminished size is in me, not in him. And just at the moment when someone at my side says, "There, he is gone," there are other eyes watching him coming, and other voices ready to take up the glad shout, "Here he comes." And that is dying. And when I looked up, the title of that poem is Gone from My Sight. And when I looked up, Ed was gone from my sight. And that is a poem by Henry Van Dyke. The hospice nurse asked Susan what our arrangements, what our plans were. And we told her that Ed wanted to be cremated. And she told us about this cremation service. And Susan went on the website and looked it up. The director's name was Susan. Their icon on their website was a blue dragonfly. And their motto was, "Go in style, not in debt." I said, "Susan, we found our place." So a couple of days after Ed passed, Susan and I sat down to compose the obituary. And so, it was getting pretty wordy. He had some accomplishments. And I had no idea how much an obituary cost. And it was getting up in the $2,000 range. And I said, "Susan, Ed won't like this." And I said, "Let's forget about putting it in the paper." He didn't think the paper was worth 25 cents. So I sent it to Barry, and Barry put it in a professional journal, and we thought, that's good enough. So that's what we did. A few days later, Riley was down at the lake playing with his electronic boat. And so I went down to watch him. Susan was down there with him. And the park around the lake is called Founders Park. And so I went down to be with them, and we noticed that there were men taking benches out of trucks and setting them on concrete pads around the park. So we went over to look at them, and we noticed that some had memorial plaques on them. And so I asked the man, who happened to be the president of the Founders Association, inquired about them, and I said, "So all of these benches have been donated?" And he said, "Oh, yes." And he said, but there's one left. I said, I'll take it. So Ed's obituary and some more went on a park bench down at Founders Point. And when you drive into West Haven, Ed's bench will be facing you at the three-way stop. And it has a little plaque on it. And the ice cream parlor is across the street. And we spent a lot of time down there on that bench eating ice cream. So anyway, notice it when you drive by, or come and sit a spell and have an ice cream cone. Oh, the end of that story is, so anyway, I told the president, I said, I'll take that bench. The next day, I sent him a check and put what I wanted on the plaque. And so, after I left him that day, I had to go to Kroger, and when I got out of my car, there were dragonflies all around me. I called Susan and I said, Susan, Ed likes the idea of a bench. Oh. So anyway, just a little story.
Well, thank you, Mom. So you get a little insight to some of the sacred points of this past year, but I want to kind of just reflect, and because this is such a special group of people, and so many of you worked with him in a professional capacity. So I was really thinking about this morning, like, what is it that, and so many of you, you could impart this wisdom. I've really enjoyed, thank you for those of you who've come up and shared what Dad, meant to you in your professional life and your personal life and what he taught you. And somebody said to me that he was his number one business mentor. And I thought, gosh, I could say the same thing. Life mentor, business mentor. And so I think about it a lot because we're still learning a lot in all aspects of life and business. But when I think about the things that, if I had to boil it down to, Dad always said, a good preacher once said, what 3 points, 3 lessons could you take from this? And I was kind of thinking about it, and I thought, gosh, Dad really instilled in me, and I think in so many of you, the value of integrity, of personal integrity. And he gave his word, and he did not go back on that word, did he not? And Jamie's going to tell you a funny story that you might not know about it, but I'm going to let him tell it because it's funny it's even more funny from his perspective. But that personal integrity, money can't buy it. And nobody can take it from you. You can only give it away. So that there's a phrase in the cadet prayer that says, always choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong. And I think Dad was so great with that, right? I don't think it didn't matter to him so much what people thought about him. It mattered to him, his personal integrity and who he was, and that, he knew who he was. And, and his connection with Creator and what that meant to him. It was funny. I remember growing up, I was like, gosh, I'm going to church 2-3 times a week. Mom was cooking at the church and handbells and choir and all this stuff. And I remember I got the courage to ask Dad one time. I was like, he was going out hunting, quail hunting. And I remember standing, I was like, golly, why don't you have to go to church on Sunday? And I have to go like 3 times a week. And I remember I don't know if y'all knew this, but his grandfather was a Methodist minister and his mother was the organist. And he looked right at me. He goes, you got a lot of catching up to do. Don't worry about me. And he actually said, I feel closer to God out there hunting in the great outdoors than I do at sitting in a church pew. And over time, that's another thing I've learned is that relationship with self and God doesn't have to be in a church pew. It can be next to a river. It can be anywhere in the great outdoors. And the second lesson, if I had to distill it down to just 3, is that the value of relationships. And all of you who knew him in his professional life or in his personal life, I mean, his associates became his friends, and friends became family. And although I'm an only child, I could tell you if we had a bunch of, gathering of West Pointers here or military people, I mean, there are people in my life that loved him like a father because he treated them like a son or a daughter. And those of you who know Justin and the Tightline Adventures family out in Montana, I mean, he loved them like they were his own children. And so we have this beautiful relationship. Emily and Stacy back there, girls that I grew up with, he sure loved them like daughters. And so, this is family. You're all family. And I know Garrett, hopefully you all heard, poor Garrett, our oldest son, tested positive for COVID. So that's why he's not here. And don't worry, we were very careful with him. I was like, all right, I'm going to order you some food, and you're going to go to the mountains. So that's another good, we're not in the mountain, we're here. You're going to go up to the mountain house and quarantine in the mountains. So I'm sure he's getting his own nature experience. But he's doing fine. He's doing just fine. We just wanted to be really cautious and, of course, not expose anybody, ourselves included. So, but that value of relationships. And I think lastly, Dad loved to have fun. He worked hard, don't we know it? But he played even harder. And he always told me, if it's not fun, why do it? And that all those 3 things became so apparent to me during that whole time that Mom was talking about. I mean, that whole week was honestly the most sacred week when he was in hospice. It was the most sacred time in my life ever. And I reflected on, yes, he had tons of accolades and, plenty of money, all of these things that you can't take with you. But what you do leave with you is the people that you touch and the relationships that you have, the legacy that you leave in your children, your grandchildren, the people that you've been with. And so that really became so evident to me, and just, have you lived a good life and had a lot of fun? And so I tell you what, I hope y'all have felt this, but I have certainly felt this. I really looked at my life and I'm like, you know what? If it's not fun, it's not worth doing right now, especially in these crazy times. So that's really what I wanted to share. And I don't know, do you want to share your... You want to see? Riley was saying he was feeling a little nervous. I was like, I know you don't necessarily know all these people, but you can come up here. Look at this. This is what Hawaii boy is like. Okay, he's used to being barefoot. He already has the, I know, collared shirt, this big deal. What are you trying to do?
I'm trying to make it
Oh, here, just stand right here. Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it's in my face.
Okay, let me see. This is where Garrett, I will say this about Garrett.
He's our
So
good guy.
he is at Belmont University, music business major, and I think Kevin is going to play one of his songs in a bit, but
Actually, his whole, I think maybe if we have time, if it does, his whole EP he made.
and where did he make it?
At Belmont? Or no?
No.
His whole EP he made it in Hawaii in our little shack area.
We turned our 8x8 garden shed into his recording studio. So wherever you stream music, since he's not here today and he would have played all these songs, but he created an album or an EP called Starship Sound. But if you go on Spotify or iTunes or wherever Apple Music, all these places where you can download music, and Garrett Alden, Garrett, Alden, Alden, you'll find this album. And listen to the whole album, because there's a couple of songs you're going to hear a lot of Ed Wilson in the songs. Dad was very, very influential in his music. Gave him his first guitars, took him to his first honky tonks down on Broadway, which he has since, he had a gig on Broadway, so that was kind of a full circle moment. But the song Old River that you're going to hear today, he wrote, recorded, and produced that song all by himself. And he recorded it in that little 8x8 shed, about 3/4 of it. But the last part of it, so Mom was talking about we were in Montana the month of June. He recorded the last portion of that and finished mixing and all these things that he does, the music. Did that all in Montana. And if you're listening to it, it may or may not come through on the speakers here, but if you're listening to it in your car or maybe with your headphones, you'll hear it. At the very end of that song of Old River, you're going to hear Bloody Dick Creek, which is where the ranch is in Montana. You're going to hear that stream in the background. So Garrett, he literally recorded some of it right there, and you can hear it in the very end of the song. You want to say something else about that? Or about Granddaddy?
I got one story. Okay. So, Granddaddy really got me into hunting. I've only duck hunt and turkey hunt once, or duck hunt twice. But a story was when we were in Montana and he would pay. It was like bounties, kind of. So a prairie dog or a gopher would be $1. And
That sounds so terrible, but they really are a nuisance there, aren't they?
they dig tons of holes, and he really didn't like them because he would just step in them all the time. And it was sometimes 2 years ago, we started badgers, $50, and so. And they big.
Really mean. They will hurt you. He wanted to eradicate the badgers.
I've killed. There's tons of badgers there. Last time I went was 2 months ago. Saw tons of holes, but no badger. But first time I've ever killed a badger was we are getting ready to go to Tightline Adventures' new lodge for a party. I'm all ready and stuff, but I am, just walking around the house and putting on my shirt. And I am looking through, there's tons of big windows in the house, and so I look through the window, and I see 4 badgers against the fence, just walking across. And I, go ballistic. I'm like, Granddaddy, Granddaddy, Granddaddy! And I start running around the house, trying to put my clothes on, and it's one of these type of shirts, so the button, I just, I'm not doing this, not rip it off, but I take it off, and I look for the gun, get the ammo, get all of that, and there's a great spot for the porch where it is for shooting, but I don't have a good angle, and they're behind this big tree. And so I try to look for a stand we have so I can get out into the field. Can't find the stand. Foreshadowing, it was it was on the porch. I left it on the porch a couple of days ago. It was in the other house. What was the house? What's the house called again? Trout house? Or no, that's bunkhouse. Yeah. And so I get Granddaddy out of the shower, get him, he gets dressed, and I show him the badgers, he sees the badgers, and now there's just one. And I've already taken some pot shots and some shots at the badgers, and so they run away. One little badger's trying to make a hole to escape, very slow, by the way, he barely dug anything. And we can't find the stand. And I was young, so I couldn't lift the gun. It was very heavy, so I couldn't lift it and aim right. And so Granddaddy went down on his knee. I put the gun right on his shoulder and shot the badger. So that's how I killed my first badger. And then I killed another one the next day with the stand.
Oh, that's a great story. I love that story. And that's all true. I heard about it all. Something. So, I got another story to say, or tell. I think Susan kind of put me on the spot. I've been over there for 20 minutes trying to think. That's why I told Riley to come up next. I'm trying to think, what is the integrity story that I need to tell? What is? So, hopefully everyone can hear. I can't hear very well, so sometimes I talk too loud. So, sorry if it's too loud. But before I tell that story that Susan told me to tell, that I finally figured out, I did figure out what it was, I think. Well, I'll find out after. So Mary Lou shared about the Henry Van Dyke in the poem, and that morning, Mary Lou pulled out the book, and I started to read the book. And then Mary Lou said, "What are you doing with that book?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to go to the living room and read the book." I said, "Okay, I won't take the book out of the room." So I'm sitting in the room and reading the book, and absolutely, if you have never read Henry Van Dyke, I mean, it is as if Ed Wilson was writing this book. And so the next morning, I try to read the book. I can't find the book. And but then I see it. And so Mary Lou, I get the book, and Mary Lou's watching me as I'm reading the book. And so I said, I got to get my own book. So I did. I got my own book, and I read it every morning. And but Mary Lou, she kept an eye on that book, and I didn't know that part of the story. I didn't know that on the way to Montana that you had found the book. I look in those shelves all the time. I think I read about the Blackfoot Indians. I've read about how the West was won. I've read about all these things, but this book right here is very, it's as if I'm listening to Ed. And so it's very powerful, very, I'll give you your book back. So Ed Wilson. I was invited to one of Ed Wilson's and Mary Lou's tailgate parties at West Point when I was a freshman. I didn't know Susan, but I was a football player, and other football players had knew the Wilson family because of all their epic tailgates they used to have after the games. And I was invited to the tailgate several times by different teammates, but I never went because I knew that there was beer up there, and I didn't want to get kicked out of school. So I went back and studied instead of going up to the tailgate. And then lo and behold, 5 years later, I finally meet, Susan. I knew who she was. She didn't know who I was. There was 900 of me. There was only 100 of her. So then I met Susan, and then I met Ed and Mary Lou. And after a year plus, we were in Savannah, Georgia. And Susan and Mary Lou were looking at all the art places, and Ed and I were just kind of hanging back, walking around, just kind of following the women and just kind of talking about, SEC football or, what the Braves had done this year and how the pitching looked and all those discussions and, what the deer hunting would look like or how big the stand was and what type of caliber round to shoot the duck with or, you get it, what kind of shotgun shells shoot ducks with. And I finally get the courage to ask him for Susan's hand in marriage. I knew I was going to do it that day, but it was like the last art place we went to, and I kind of was able to get him away. And I asked him for Susan's hand in marriage. And I was nervous as could be. of course, and sweaty palms and everything. And he just, of course. And I said, okay, my parents, I'm from Atlanta, so we were in Savannah. So my parents and my brothers and everyone were going to come down for Columbus Day weekend, and we were going to have a big engagement party. And so I just told Ed, I said, Ed, make sure, just don't tell anybody. We're going to try to keep this a secret. Don't tell anybody. We're going to keep this a secret. He said, oh, yeah, absolutely. I said, so we're going to keep this, my parents then come down. And this is about a month later. My parents come down, and Susan comes down from Fort Bragg, North Carolina. At the time, she was living in Fort Bragg, and I was at Fort Stewart, Georgia. And Susan comes down, and Ed and Mary Lou come out for Columbus Day weekend, and my parents and my brothers come out. And we knew that Susan and I would go to a coffee shop, and we would have what we call mocha moments. And that's where we found a lot about each other. We would go out, and we would get a book. And then we would come back, and we did this for a year when I wasn't in Kuwait or whatever. So we would come back, and then you learn a lot about somebody with what book they pull out of the shelf. And so we spent a lot of hours doing that, reading different passages from book and finding out about each other. So we call those mocha moments. So that night we were going to go to a mocha moment. Susan had no idea, right? So I proposed to her that night. And she said yes, of course. I wasn't sure she was going to, but she had a whole military career she had planned out and everything. And so I said, well, okay. So she says yes. We get back to the house. My parents are excited. My brothers are excited. I look across the room. Everyone's excited. I look across the room, and Mary Lou is standing there, white face, just like shocked, like what's going on? And I go, oh my gosh, is she not happy about this? Is she concerned about this? And I look at Ed, and Ed said, you told me to tell nobody. Yeah, Jamie, you told me to tell nobody. Wow. That told me all I needed to know about my future father-in-law. All you need to know. That man, his word was his bond. And if you told him something, he would do it. I mean, he would just, it was amazing. I mean, I was like, wow, this is a special man that I know that I'm going to be able to learn a lot from. And for 22 years, I learned so much from him. And, I mean, he was a dad to me, and he taught me so much. Just like all of you, he showed me how to be proud of everyone around you for everything that they brought to the table. For every contribution that anyone around him could make, he found that value that they brought, and he highlighted it. And that was a huge gift that he gave me, to be able to see him do that with everyone he ever came in contact with. So I just wanted to share that story, and thank you, Mary Lou. And thank you for everything. We love you.
We need to start our food line before our food gets cold. And Susan, are you going to ask a blessing?
I'll bless the food so we can eat. Gracious God, thank you for this beautiful day and this beautiful gathering of people that we love dearly. We ask that you bless each and every person here and those who couldn't be here and wanted to be. May you keep us all safe and healthy and truly living our best lives. with a sense of gratitude and joy and appreciation for all our relationships. Bless this food to the nourishment of our bodies, and may we all be well. Amen.
Okay. A very dear friend of Ed's and ours is Bob Walker, and he is going to propose a toast.
Thank you.
And you don't have to be in front of it. Just
Well, lawyers can't talk very loud. You know how that is. I've been given the great honor of proposing a toast. Mary Lou's asked me to do. I know that one way or another, I think I probably met just about everybody in here somewhere, because Ed is a networker, or was a networker, But I have known him probably shorter than most of you. I met him in 1989 when I recruited him and found him to come run a business that I was running in the ditch. He did a marvelous job, and we became fast friends and have been forever. I know Jamie and some others mentioned the word integrity. I think the number one quality that I remember so much about Ed Wilson was integrity. He was just true to his beliefs, straightforward when he talked to you about what he believed in or what he didn't. He didn't mind telling you what he really thought about somebody. He didn't mind telling you the good and the bad. He was really good. And I'd like to propose a toast to Ed Wilson, his spirit, our memories of him, and the legacy that he has left, not only his family, but all of his friends who are here tonight and some who aren't. Thank you. Hear, hear. Hear, hear.
I want Barry Thacker to come up here and tell you about something that I am so thrilled about. Just couldn't be more thrilled. But first I want to tell you about Barry Thacker and Carol Moore. Barry was one of those who went off on his own and formed his own geoengineering business, and very, very successful. And he and Carol worked for Edge and also went with Barry. And Barry knows that he could not have done it without Carol. Barry's company was asked to do a water quality project. Was it at the Briceville School in Coal Creek? And so he went up to start that project and saw a great need in Coal Creek. And he and Carol and others took a interest in that town and in that school there. And they did so many projects. They did bank stabilization, not only the water quality, they picked up trash. I think they started a dental program for the school kids there. They established scholarships for that school there, and those scholarships are still going. And so many kids he's found internships and jobs for. I could go on and on. They helped restore buildings. They put up 19 historic markers in that town. They lifted the whole town up, and they're still doing work. And also, Barry is going to bring back the chestnut trees. You know, we lost all the chestnut trees. Barry alone is going to reforest the country. He has started the trees by seed and planted thousands of chestnut trees. And so anyway, this Barry made this walking stick for Ed, and Ed was very proud of it. It's a sturdy stick, and in the mountains, you know, we have hills and uneven terrain, and Ed used this stick, and he even made one for me, and I used mine too, Barry. But anyway, Barry has something very exciting to tell you.
Thank you, Mary Lou. I want to tell you about the Ed Wilson Scholarship Endowment, or it may be the Ed Wilson Endowment Scholarship. I'm not sure which it is. But it started with the Geoprofessional Business Association came up with this idea. And Joel Carson, the executive vice president, executive director, called and said that one of the members, Gary Rabba, had provided seed money and that GBA wanted to start this scholarship at Tennessee Tech. And I was shocked because I have been working with the Geoprofessional Business Association, and this is an organization it's mainly in this country, but it also has members from Canada and Australia, New Zealand, various places. And I have never, I've been involved with them for 30 some odd years. The organization is about 50 years old. I have never heard of them starting a scholarship for anybody. So I was shocked. But then I got to thinking about it, and I wasn't so shocked because Ed was a past president. He led the way, and two of his associates, Ken Darnell and Jay Martin, also followed him as president. And Ed he was on the board of many of the members, but probably more importantly, he helped sell most of the companies, just like he did mine and several of the others at Jim's and several others in here. He would help with the sale of those companies. And I think it was even more so than that. Jay mentioned that to me a few minutes ago that, all you had to do was go up and tell somebody that you were an associate of Ed Wilson and you had instant credibility. And I've even had people come up to me and say that, oh, you're Barry Thacker, that I didn't know who was. They said, yeah, Ed Wilson told me about you. So if you were associated with Ed, that gave you instant credibility. And he had this slow Southern way of talking that he tried to fool you. But let me tell you, the man was a genius. It wasn't just as an engineer. I mean, as a businessman, Ed you always listen to what he had to say. So it made a lot of sense as to why GBA was doing this. And the individual, as I said, Gary Rabba, put up the initial $10,000 seed money. GBA has put some money in. And when Ed helped Carol and me sell our company, he told us that he was going to help Jim Littlejohn, and that was going to be his last deal. Well, it wasn't his last deal because he also helped Gary Rabba sell his company in Texas. So I think Gary was appreciative of all the things Ed did, and so he put this first $10,000. And Carol, do you have the handouts for? She's got it's for Tennessee Tech, and I expect the Edge people to fork over money for this endowment scholarship. Now, Paula Harris called us today and said that she's convinced Barge to donate $2,500 for the scholarship. Now, Jim Downing and Ken Falk don't claim that covers you because that ship has sailed, boys. You need to come up with your own money. So, yeah, personal check. Jim, this stuff of, well, can anybody cover dinner? Because all I've got's $100 bills. You can, after all these years, you can use some of those $100 bills to help with this scholarship endowment. And as incentive, I have made walking sticks. I'm going to trust all of you to fork over the. to fork. I'm going to trust you to fork over the money, and so it's the honor system. So please come pick up a walking stick, and I got to give you some instructions here. Yeah, you need instructions. I've got two types. I've got one that's a straight stick here, and I got one that's a curvy stick. And let me tell you, if you walk down the road with this straight stick, the women are going to look at you and go, God, there's that old fart again with that fence post that he's walking with. But now, if you walk with a stick like this, they're going to say, ooh, that guy walks on the wild side. So,
Also, tailors them if you have a big butt.
so knowing the Edge guys, I brought mainly straight sticks for you old farts. But please, if you Edge guys and gals would grab you a stick, you're more than welcome to them. And whichever ones are left over, if you'll play with the honor system, any of you non-Edge people, you're welcome to take a stick too, if you will agree to make a donation to the Ed Wilson Scholarship Endowment.
Ed would probably say, I need 2 sticks.
Also, and anybody in here, I'm gonna ladies up here, this is how you can donate for the scholarship. And all the extra people, I will be emailing you the link, so it's very easy to click on and do your money. And
Also, we have, we are going to, we've got these thank you cards for Gary Rabba and for Joel Carson that I'd like for all the Edge people to sign so that we can send it to them. And I'm going to send them a walking stick also as a token of friendship for this kind deed that they did for Ed. Would somebody else like to come up and tell an Ed Wilson story? Yeah. Now, let me tell you something. You can only believe about half of what he's going to tell you.
Well, I can look back in time, and I'm looking over there at Larry right now and thinking about first time that when MCI was set up, and I was in Knoxville, and Larry and Jim were running the GA office there, and I was in the Knoxville office there, and we started from there. And then Basil came up from Chattanooga, and we just kept on going. Those Basil and I were talking about earlier. Those were good times. They really were. And that all started because I went to I was with the county, Knox County, and I went to a December gratification thing for clients that GA had, and Garland Rose asked me to go with him, and Ed was there, and it went from there. Chuck and Ed then talked to me about coming on board and starting a Knoxville office for MCI. But that's how that started, and it's a wonderful part of my life. But another wonderful part of my life was after we had sold Edge, and we remained there for all of us for 3 years, the key people, and then we dispersed pretty much after that. I think I'd already gone with Barge at this time, and I was in the office, and I get this phone call, and I answer the phone, and, hey, Jimbo. And we knew exactly who it was when he said that. It was Ed. He said, let's go fishing. And of course, he knew how much I loved to fish. Well, we fished together quite a bit, and even before we started trout fishing. And so I said, yeah, let's go. And he said, well, you're going to have to make a few plans. Said, I just bought myself a place in Montana. And so we went out. So I started going out to Montana, and I met all the guys out there, and you know, and fell in love with them. But we had some good times fishing. We really, really did. And Ed and I would float the streams, and we'd wade a lot in that creek you talked about. Bloody Dick Creek. I'll never forget, we were on one of the trips I was there in Montana, and Ed was saying, you know, we got to find a small stream we can wade. And so we got the USGS maps, and we started looking for these little streams. And we found, and so we had come up with 2 or 3 streams or something like that. Maybe the next time I came out, we could wade those streams. And so I'd gone back home, and about 3 weeks later, I get this call, and he said, Jimbo, I found it. I got the stream, and the name was Bloody Dick Creek. So now fast forward a couple more years, he takes me up to Bloody Dick Creek, and so most of you know my prowess is how agile I am, especially, and so we're fishing, and Ed's moving along, and this creek has got a lot of mud banks and a lot of mud bogs and stuff associated with it. But we were catching fish like crazy, and I mean he always said, you know, Jimbo, you can catch fish. There's no doubt about it. And so we would go around one crook and another crook, and we'd hit these little pockets, and we were catching these trout about this size, and it was a lot of fun. And he said, well, there's one other area I want you to go. So let's walk across here, and there's this mud bog. And we were in our wading sandals, and I go across that mud bog, and my foot sinks into the mud, and it goes, beyond the ankle, and I'm trying to pull my foot out, and the sandal is in the mud. So I am fooling around with it like that to try and get it back on my foot, and guess what? I fall. And I fall face down in that mud. I mean, I am in the mud. And Ed comes back, and he just looks, and he said, like that, and he said, but you can catch fish. So that's my story.
Hey, Jim, tell them about the Amazon.
Oh, man. Oh, gosh. Ed and I went fishing in the Amazon, and my God, I was glad. I was lucky to get out of there alive. I mean, but I wasn't the only one. It's not because I failed or anything. It was just, there's a lot of nasty critters in that water in the Amazon, let me tell you. It is, we went in one area, and we're fishing this stream, and it's fairly shallow, and we're in these boats that, like a John boat, and it houses, and you can fish 2 out of it, and the guide, and the motor that they use are what's called jet motors, so you can go on shallow streams and stuff. And we're floating along on these streams and meandering around, and there's just all kinds of crocodiles and caimans, and these are bad animals. These are bad. These are pretty bad stuff. And so they tell us one day, said, we're going to take you to a landlocked lagoon. And we pull over and off the stream and park the boat, and we start hiking in the jungle in our sandals and stuff. And of course, it's hot as Hades now. It is hot as all get out. And we hike at least about a mile back into the jungle, and it was the dry weather. And what had happened is these lagoons they still had water in them, but the outlet for them had dried up, and therefore the fish were trapped. And so if you had enough nerve or were crazy enough, and of course we all were, if you wanted to wade out in those lagoons, you would catch what we were trying to fish for more than anything else was called peacock bass. And they're fun to catch, especially on a fly rod. And then some of them, get this size and that, it was great. And but we're sitting there catching fish like crazy, and I turn around and look, and there's a caiman, which is like, a crocodile, comes up not too far from me. And my buddy fishing beside of me, and another caiman come up, and we go, what's what's going on here? And he said, oh, we asked the guide, well, the guy, I think, was half loco anyway. And he said, oh, no problem, man, no problem. So we continue fishing because we're catching one fish after another. And we had, when we went out we were in water about up to almost knee deep. And he said, just be careful with the eels. And I said, what do you mean eels? And they you know, their English was, they had just kind of broken. And he goes, does it? And I went, oh my God, no, not an electric eel. I still kept on catching the fish. My buddy left, went back got out of there, and I kept on catching fish. And the next cast, I bring in another fish, and it's a piranha. It's about this big. I didn't know piranha got that big. And he said, oh, that's a red-breasted, which is a flesh-eating piranha. And I said, all right, that's it. I'm out of here. So we were lucky to get out of there, I'll tell you. But Ed and I saw all kinds of stuff in Brazil, I'm telling you. So anyway. I'll get my stick. Can I get two? Hey, man, I like it. Is that it? That's not it.
All right. Jamie gave me permission to say something. I'm a little bit different from all you folks, and I appreciate you. I've heard all of your names through the years. I met Ed in 1979 when we moved to Franklin, he and Mary Lou, and we had a young son at that time. Never did any business with him. I was just a social friend. We played a lot of golf, a lot of tennis, quail hunted, duck hunted, dove hunted, anything outdoors you could do, played tennis and golf. Riley, I'm ashamed to say this, but your dad and I were a doubles team at the old Carnton Country Club. We never won a match. I take that back. We had a forfeit one night. But that was about it. But our kids grew up. Ed and Mary Lou, Susan, they helped us raise our children, and we appreciate that. We had a great time with them. Ed was a special person, as all of you know, a great friend. I can't tell you how many things he did for us and our family. Susan goes off to college and to West Point, and our son had a real bad wreck and destroyed his car, and we were having some financial troubles. Ed gave us Susan's car for him to drive. I mean, just things like that he did for us. He didn't have to do that, but that's the kind of guy he was. And so to know him was special. To have him as a friend, it's the best you ever had. And I can say this, I think my family is better for having known Ed Wilson, and because he was a special guy. And I'm gonna take 3 sticks. I got 2 boys, and we're all gonna do something. I mean, I don't know, $10 or $15. I mean, I'm in for the long haul. So. What'd you say? But I appreciate it. Susan, thank you so much for having us. And the family is great, special to us. He did so much for me as a person, personally, and I think he helped me grow and helped me realize some things that I needed to change in my life. And so, like I said, I think we're better because we knew him, and I hope you are too. Thank you.
All right, you edge people better go get one now.
Give me a strike. Very good. Oh, here you go. I'm watching that.
What you guys are saying is exactly true. I wanted to piggyback on something that Barry was talking about with the scholarship. I talked to Joel the other day. What those guys have done is fantastic to get that scholarship started. But as you know, Ed, as we all know, Ed ran around with a lot of groups. I've been extremely fortunate to have run around with some of his outdoor groups, duck hunting and fishing and hunting and all that kind of thing, both in Montana and around here and in Arkansas. But what I did, Barry, was with Joel, have set up an email list of the outdoor group, the hunting group, and that kind of thing, which has some capacity. Those guys have some ability to really plug in and help that. With Mary Lou's blessing, she agreed that would be great. So to hopefully expand the net a little bit to some guys that we can really make an impact on that scholarship. I've challenged them, and I know they're going to come through. So that'll be good to get, and challenge Higgins too, because he's not that Higgins, the other Bob Higgins. But you need to be challenged too, buddy. Yeah. Yeah, Bob's on the list. But the other thing, Barry, that was your story about the walking stick was great. It reminded me of, I've got a gazillion stories with Ed, of course, and all incredibly favorable. But there's one video that I happened to catch when we were at Brooks River in Alaska several years ago, when there were three of us on this river with one guide, and the river was flowing thigh deep. It was flowing pretty well in that summer, and we were all, one guy was in the middle, one guy was on one bank, and I was fishing on the other bank. Fortunately, I was on the bank without the bears. But the video I have is a classic. Ed was fishing. You don't pay attention to where the bears are, because they're fishing. They're getting ready for wintertime and doing the same thing we were, but and focus on bringing the fish in. But for some reason, I was taking a video of Ed, and a bear came out of this tall grass, not any further from Larry, from you to me. And I've got all this on video. And the rocks in this stream were at least as tall as your knee, but they weren't over the surface. So to hightail it out of there, you're high stepping these rocks, and with a good current. It was been easy to lose it. The fellow in the middle of the river he'd had a bad knee, and he had a stick that he was walking with, so he was okay. The guide was on my side of the fellow in the middle, and Ed was just doing this, trying to high step over these rocks. Got it all on video. Then it was, and you know how some of those experiences are. Yeah. And if you ever get an invite to fish with Downing, be careful. His face in the mud story was only one of several stories. He spared you guys a few of them, but there's is that true or not? Yeah. But no, I'm counting on some of these other guys to help with the contribution for this scholarship, because I think this is a great idea, and thank you and Joel and all you guys for pulling that together, because that's going to be fantastic. So, great. You okay? Yeah. Oh. The other, interestingly enough, the other thing I was going to mention was I'm not sure how much Tennessee Tech deals with gifts of stock, but I spoke with a lady named Jessica Smith the other day. And if you have an interest in doing that, you need to talk to her, because I guess she's the person that I happen to know a fellow who's in the president's office, and he confirmed that this was the gal. But they're navigating, stock gifts a little bit. But that's a great way, with what the market's done lately, if you consider that, to give a gift of appreciated stock to help on that cause. And I've got her contact information if you would like it. It took me, believe it or not, it took me about 3 days to find the right person. Couldn't believe it. Yeah, I bet she does. But you gotta make sure it gets in the right account and all that kind of stuff. So, but that's another thing I wanted to mention. So I'll be thinking of Ed when I take this stick. So, thank you, Barry.
I'm going to take just a minute here. Tomorrow, my grandson is going to Tennessee Tech, and we're going up there as grandparents with him. So we appreciate these scholarships at Tennessee Tech. I don't know if he will be in geotechnical. He's really enthralled with computers, so I think he's going to do something with that. But, I was so fortunate to have an opportunity to work with all of you, and especially Ed many years ago when I started. And Ed just always impressed me with the knack of encouragement, because he could take you and just make you feel like you've really accomplished something when maybe inside you didn't really realize that you had, And I remember one incident in particular when Saturn was coming to town, and we got all excited about the opportunity to work on the Saturn plant down in Spring Hill, and we had a meeting. We were partnered with another firm out of Michigan, and so the big guys, the big wigs from Saturn and General Motors were coming down to interview us and all. And Ed wanted me to go because they were really concerned about the sinkholes and the geology and all that kind of stuff, So Ed said, you go in there and you tell them what you know about that, and about the rock and all that kind of stuff, So I said, all right, I can do that. And so I got up there, and I was telling them all about the subsurface conditions and the Big Buchanan limestone and all the, what they were expecting to find and all that kind of stuff. And I could see that their eyes were kind of lighting up about that, and at the end of the presentation, on the way back to the office, Ed said, you had those guys right in the palm of your hand. He said, you had them excited about this job. And he said, man, you did a great job. And I didn't know that I'd done a great job, but that elevated my self-confidence and my personal esteem. And I thought, if I can impress Ed Wilson and impress these guys from General Motors, maybe I got an opportunity here, I might be able to do something meaningful. But Ed was just always there, always that encourager. And he had a way, and I've been to several meetings with clients, he could do the same thing. He could walk into a meeting or a conference and just get to the bottom line, just have the most sensible, well-understood position that made everybody feel like, oh, well, there you go. That's the answer. That's what we've been looking for. And he could walk out of that room, and then on the way back to the car said, man, I hope that was right. And he always was right. But what a great opportunity. Thank you all.
Let me have 1 minute, Edward. Mine's short.
You can have 2. 2 minutes.
I was telling Susan and Ed taught Barry and me, when you are going to call on a client, or if you're going to a meeting, if you are selling, you have to dress up really nice. But if you're buying, you can wear whatever you want to. And I told Barry, he is obviously buying today. But he dressed up because he usually just has a Coe Creek t-shirt on. And the other was, like Jim, we love Ed because he helped us sell our company, and we always told him, like those billboards, if you need to sell you, if you hire Ed, he will turn your wreck into a check.
Well, I'm glad we've moved into kind of the light banter here and not so serious, because my story's not really very serious, but we opened an office in Charlotte, North Carolina. And you know, Charlotte, one thing they're famous for is car racing, right? So Ed calls me up one day and says, hey, you know, the Charlotte 400 or whatever it is running next weekend. I've never been to one of those. Reckon we could get some tickets? I said, I'll put my man on it right away. The guy in Charlotte, I called him up, said, go get some tickets for Ed, me, and this guy we were going to take to the client that we were going to take. He said, okay, I'll take care of that. So anyway, we get there, the guy makes the handoff. We're wandering through the Charlotte Motor Speedway area trying to find out where we're going. And we showed the tickets to, like I said, oh, yeah, you need to get on that elevator and go up. So we get on the elevator, we go up, and we come out. We're not in the crowd. We're in a nice hallway with carpets and everything. Showed my tickets to this other guy. He said, oh, you're right in there in the executive suite. I said, okay. So we go in. They've got this spread, you know, all the food you'd ever want to eat, anything you wanted to drink. You were all enclosed, glass in front. And Ed said, what did these tickets cost? I said, well, I don't know. I just told our guy to get us some tickets. And I stood looking at it. I said, Ed, these tickets cost $1,500 a piece. I said, what are we going to do? He said, we're going to go in there and eat some food. But had no idea what we were getting into. So I had a little conversation with my guy after we got back. I said, look, you're going to spend this much money on tickets. You know, run it by me ahead of time so I don't get embarrassed. But, you know, when you're going through your career, you're fortunate if you've got a few people that really make an impact on you. And Ed Wilson was the one. Top of my list. So let me tell you another funny story. Get away from that serious stuff. But we had a place that there in Charlotte when we would go to entertain the clients, public works guy, the water and sewer guy, and they would always take us, insist on going to this out-of-the-way little dive called the Ranch House. And the Ranch House, they had steaks, but one of the things they were famous for was shrimp cocktail. And what made them famous for that was the sauce. And what made the sauce famous was gooey gobs of horseradish in. So, you know, anytime you went in there for the first time, they would play this game on you. You know, they would say, now you really need to load that shrimp up with that cocktail sauce because it is fantastic. So we'd do it and it'd blow your eyeballs out. So I had Ed there one time. Oh boy, this is going to be fun. So we told Ed, now when you get this shrimp cocktail, you need to put the cocktail sauce on there, heavy, because it's just, well, he did that, and literally he had tears squirting out of his eyes that were going all the way across the table. And he said, somebody should have warned me about that. I said, well, it wouldn't have been any fun if we'd have warned you about it, you know? I mean, so that was, and I got probably lots more stories I could tell about Ed, but he was a fabulous influence in my career, and I'll miss him every day. I need to track me.
You got another story? Okay, Riley's got, this will be the last story. Got one more story. And then, okay, this is about,
Okay. So I remembered this one. So it was the second time ever duck hunting. This is after Granddaddy passed, and this was the first time Garrett ever duck hunted. It was me, Garrett, and Dad. And was it two other guys? Two other Granddaddy's friends? Who were they, Dad? I completely forgot.
Mr. Bonner, Gilbert Bonner.
Gilbert Bonner? Who? And Mr. Anderson, yes, okay. So there are really good callers. And we get out there, obviously, early morning, and 3 amazing things happen in a span of like 10 minutes. Beautiful, like pink, blue, tons cool colors for a sunrise. And we see the North Star as bright as ever. It was super cool. And then the last thing before we duck hunted, or before you could start shooting, a shooting star went right across. And as soon as me and Dad saw that, we were like, this is our day to get our first duck. Me and Garrett both didn't have our first duck. Last day of hunting, Granddaddy will give this to us. And so this was it like 2-3 birds land right in front of us, right in front of the decoys, right next to the decoys. And we're 2 minutes out before we can shoot. And
This is being recorded.
Huh?
This is being recorded.
Oh.
Make sure you stay legit.
Why? So we're all watching the clock, and who was Craig. He's Garrett ready, his gun out, and Craig is on his Craig. Mr. Anderson. Oh my gosh, is on his looking at his watch or phone, and he's like, 1 minute, 30 seconds, get ready, and like 10 seconds before we could shoot, right before the bird was about to get off, he was like, shoot it, get it. And it flies up, boom, and Garrett gets him. Emma runs out, grabs it. First, it was a mallard, beautiful mallard, and it was Garrett's first duck. About 15 minutes later, not even?
2 minutes.
2 minutes later, I guess. 2 minutes later, 2 minutes later, okay, 2 minutes later, a duck comes buzzing us, just zoom, zoom, zoom. And I'm like, I'm just watching it. And it comes flying. I get up, I hit it. It was super quick, lucky shot. And it flies like 10 feet to my left. And I was literally about to I was on the step to get out of the blind to go grab the duck. I was that happy. I was so happy. Tears going, I was crying so hard. I was so happy. And they all yelled at me, like, don't leave the thing. Go, Emma, go. Emma got it. I was so happy. Granddaddy gave that to us, and I'm just, thank you.
I want to add a little piece to that story. So we were hunting with Gilbert Bonner. Him and Ed were really, really close hunting buddies from the first time Ed had gone hunting in Arkansas. He's a local farmer in Arkansas. And I'd known Gilbert for almost 16 years at this point, and really, really close friends. And Gilbert would hunt with us every season. When I would come, Gilbert was with us. It was Gilbert, Ed, and me. And then when the boys would come, it was Gilbert was in the pit. Gilbert, Ed, the boys, me. And like Riley said, we didn't do that much. So when these boys came down this last hunting season, you want to say something?
Real quick.
We're going to fight over this one.
I hunted with Granddaddy his very last time he duck hunted. That's all I gotta say. I was
His
with
last
him
duck hunt.
His last duck hunt, and it wasn't good.
No, we
one.
didn't get
Or
any
we got like
ducks.
2, but it was still very fun.
So that morning happened exactly how Riley told it. I mean, exactly how Riley told it. And Gilbert looked at me, and he had tears in his eyes. And this is a 78-year-old man, farmer his whole life, rice farmer. Tears in his eyes, and he said, "My life is now complete. I've done what the Lord brought me here to do, and that was to get Ed Wilson's grandsons their first ducks." So, special moment. That's a great story.
Thank you all for coming. This has been so special, very, very special. I love each and every one of you. Thank you. I'll never forget it. Thanks for coming. So we're yes, Edge Pictures. Oh, I'm sorry. Darn. Sit back down. We got one more thing to do. Oh,
yes. So
thank
we
you,
got to play
Kevin.
Old River. I kind of shared with you about a little bit about the song when I shared earlier. Y'all remember that? So let's just play it. Yeah, let's do it.
In hard times, don't be afraid. Keep your faith. Don't you let up. It will all be alright. My granddad, when I was 5 years old, taught me what life's all about. Down by that old creek. But I can't breathe. You are the man I aspire to be. And I'm asking God why life moves too fast. Only so much time. Old river, put it east. May we stay for a while. Feel the light in this cold, dark night. May the good Lord put this cloud behind. May we all be free. Oh, I can breathe. Please guide him. Oh, take him to the river. Feel the light dancing underneath the mountain sky, holding us close. Oh, she's watching the journey to be. Must walk that walk. Remember you told me someday I'll fly, and I'm bigger than my body. Can't breathe. You are the man I aspire to be. And I'm asking God why life moves too fast. Only so much time. river, but it is. May we stay for a while. Feel the light in this cold, dark night. May the good Lord put this cloud behind. May we all be free. Oh, I can breathe. Please, God, you. I said, take him to the river. I said, take him to the river. Take him to the river. Take him to the river. Take him to the river.
Very special. And Garrett he will be having some performances in Nashville, and I hope y'all get to come and listen to him. Thank y'all for coming.